You and your fellow players are witches who have come upon the medieval village of Wickersby and are vying to be declared the Village Crone. Now it's time to learn more about casting spells. The second step in the order of play is to move and cast spells. In turn order, every player may move any of his or her familiars and/or any villagers up to 6 spaces total, and cast as many spells as they have ingredients for. Moving and casting spells can be done in any order, even interchangeably. Note that spells that cause villagers to change location do not count against the 6 movements a player may use per turn. There are 8 spells in the Village Crone, and each one requires ingredients and an incantation. You must have the correct ingredients and say the incantation for the spell to work. If someone catches you using the wrong ingredients or skipping the incantation, your spell fails and you lose the ingredients. You do not have to have a familiar in a location or by a villager you are casting a spell on. Think of yourself on a broom, riding above Wickersby as you cast spells. You may cast spells for strategic reasons, even if they do not necessarily meet a witch's scheme. After you cast spells, discard the ingredients into separate piles. Put Eye of Newt cards in the piles for the ingredients you were using them instead of. When the ingredients run out in a location, replenish the location with the discards for that location. As an alternate rule, players may trade ingredients with each other during the move and cast spells phase. The rate of exchange is negotiated between the players. Now that you have the general rules for casting spells, let's discuss each spell in depth. The first spell is Conjuring. You use Conjuring to add a familiar to the village green. The ingredients needed for this spell are 1 fire, 1 flower, 1 silver, and 1 soil. And the incantation is, for feed and greed, for want and need, stock with me, you cursed breed. Players may also create their own incantations for spells, if they wish. The love spell causes the fates of 2 villagers to be joined and moves 1 villager to the position of another villager. To cast the love spell, combine 2 fire and say, from the belly of desire and the laws of attraction, be chained now without distraction. You choose which villager moves and then place the love token on both villagers. The position the villagers occupy can be in a location or in a space outside of a location. If one villager in love is affected in any way, the other is affected also. If one is moved, both are moved. If a spell is cast on one, both are affected in the same way. To break the love spell, combine 2 fire and say, from the belly of desire and the laws of attraction, be unchained now without distraction. Then place one of those villagers in any location containing one of your familiars. Another way to break the love spell is to cause one villager in love to fall in love with another villager. Then the resulting movement can happen one of 2 ways. Either the targeted villager remains in place and his or her new lover moves to the targeted villager's location, and the jilted lover moves to a space occupied by one of your familiars, or the targeted villager moves to the location of his or her new lover and the jilted lover remains in place. The summoning spell enables you to move any one villager or familiar to any location containing one of your familiars when you combine 1 flower and 1 ingredient from the target location, and say, by beast that flies and beast that crawls, appear at once within these walls. Note that if you summon a familiar, it doesn't have to be yours. This is a way of affecting other players' plans. When summoning to the tithe barn, combine 1 flower with 1 of any ingredient of your choice. Because the village green doesn't contain ingredients, you cannot summon to the village green. And if a villager or familiar is already in a location, you can't summon him or her to that location. Remember that if two villagers in love are summoned, both are affected, so both move to the target location. The switching spell enables you to exchange the positions of any two villagers or any two familiars, or any one villager with any one familiar. The familiar does not have to be your own, and the position can be a location or a space. To cast this spell, combine 1 silver and 1 soil and say, "Distance slight or distance vast, transpose your place and do it fast." If two villagers are in love, both of them switch. If a familiar is carrying a frog, the frog travels with the familiar. The transformation spell turns a villager into a frog, or frog into a villager. To cast this spell, combine 1 fire and 1 flower and say, "Like wheat from soil is crushed to flour, thy form is now within my power." If transformation is cast on a villager in love, the love spell is broken and both villagers turn to frogs. If you are using the transformation spell to turn a frog into a villager and you have more than 1 villager to choose from, you may select any of the villagers who have been turned into frogs. In other words, you don't have to remember who the frogs used to be. Also note that frogs do not count as the villagers they used to be for achieving witches' schemes. For example, denigrate the Lord, which requires the Lord to switch places with the farmer, cannot be achieved unless the Lord is transformed from his current state as a frog first. The fortune spell allows you to draw any 3 ingredients from the tithe barn and add them to your hand. To do so, combine 2 silver and say, "What once was wrought is wealth unseen. I command thee now, riches be gleaned." You can look at all of the ingredients in the tithe barn to pick the 3 you want. The binding spell is used to lock a location down so that no villagers or familiars may enter or leave the location. To cast the spell, combine 2 soil and say, "Come what may, come what might, shut the door and lock it tight." Then, place the binding ring over the location. Ingredients can still be harvested from bound locations, but familiars cannot be conjured into the village green when it is bound. To unbind the location, combine 2 of the same of any ingredient and say, "Come what may, come what might, open the door and let in the light." Even the player who bound the location must combine the 2 ingredients to cast the spell to unbind. The protection spell can be used to block any spell by another player. It must be cast before the other player takes another action, such as moving, casting another spell, or drawing a new witch's scheme card. To cast the spell, combine 1 soil and 1 of any ingredient and say, "Your evil schemes and bad intent now are simply spells misspent." You can cancel protection with protection. The player whose spell was blocked does not get his or her ingredients back. Now you know everything you need to know to cast spells. For more information, see our videos on how to play, movement and scattering, and witches' scheme cards. And the best of luck as you contend to become the Village Crone.